Good afternoon. Welcome to this is our fourth session for the webinar series for MDTP. And we still probably have a few more who will join us. So I'll just check back in with them in a minute. My name is Kimberly Samaniego and I'm the director of MDTP. And we have a few people here, two people here to support us today in our webinar. So thank you for joining us. Today's topic will be a middle school topic and how to use the MDTP results to enact re-engagement strategies. Leading us today is Carol Treglio. Carol is, hi Carol.
How are
Carol
you?
is our outreach facilitator for the UC San Diego region. And then we also have Terry Gibbs with us. Hi, Terry. Terry is the outreach facilitator for the UCLA Los Angeles region, and she also is the associate director for Smarter Balanced. And Carol's also, just so you know, I have to do this too, she's the president-elect for the CMC conference. So just in case you're wondering how these wonderful people that we get to work with MDTP, they have pretty robust experiences. So thank you for being here. Just a little bit about MDTP. We are a grant-funded project. We are umbrellaed under the CSU and the UC, and we're funded by the California Academic Partnership Program, which is CAP. We make up about a third of their budget every year. So we're able to provide resources to you, all our testing and our support training to you free of charge. And so with that, without further ado, I will hand it over to Carol. So Carol, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Glad that you're here. It's so here we are, and we're all virtual. Your class is virtual. Everybody's virtual these days. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm thinking that at this point in the game, you have more than likely given the assessment or not, or maybe you're thinking about it and you're looking for ideas. And so it's kind of so this year's kind of an interesting phenomena because we don't know the kids and all we're seeing are pictures on the screen. So it's kind of a unique phenomena that we're dealing with. So it's really important that we assess and then we begin to think about, from that assessment, what we do about it. And so that's where we are today. So today I'm going to briefly talk about the data analysis, then talk about we can re-engage or reteach, and we want to talk about why we want to re-engage versus reteach. We want to take a look at, think about tasks that we could use to re-engage students, different types of tasks. Some of these may be new to you. Some of these you may have done before. Some of these may reaffirm what you're already doing. So hopefully today you'll get some new ideas or different ideas about how we might re-engage these students. And then and there are a couple of other resources that we have also through MDTP that I'll just talk briefly about. So basically we talk about three different pieces. We identify, we analyze, and we enact. So we identify students' current understandings, misconceptions, and gaps. So we look at what is now. We then analyze that data. We unpack the progressions. And then from that, we enact strategies and design learning experiences to meet those learning goals. So we've used this diagnostic tool to determine the strengths of the class, determine common errors, misconceptions, learning misconceptions, and gaps, and thinking about the nature of the error or the misconception. Is it really a misconception, or is it that they didn't carry out a procedure? Is it that they forgot a negative sign? Is it that they didn't finish the problem? Is the error a misconception? Is it truly a misconception? Is it incomplete processing? Did they start the problem correctly but didn't finish it? And then, do the results indicate unfinished learning? And then we want to then think about, okay, so if we answer one or more of these, what is that impact on learning? Okay, so we started by identifying, and in the identifying, I always think about this item analysis guide because it tells us where in the data we can begin to analyze. And so from last week, we took a look at, we went into this last week, we took a look at where we find these particular items. Where do we determine strength? Where do we determine common misconceptions and errors? Where do we determine unfinished learning and gaps? And so there were some keys along the way. 3 of the 4 you can really glean, for the most part, from the item analysis, but you really need to, in order to really determine those misconceptions and errors, you really need to take a look at the distractor analysis. And we did that last week. And if for some reason you missed last week, we do have it, all these are videotaped, they're webinars, and they will be on our website, MDTP website. And then from there, we are really unpacking the progressions of mathematics needed in those essential understandings to master the content of your course. So the progressions, the past, present, and future. So thinking about where did students first learn this? Why is this concept important to this year's content? What is the possible misunderstanding? And then thinking about, okay, if we don't do anything about it, what are the implications for future courses? For example, if we don't deal with misunderstandings about fractions, how do students, when they get to algebra, deal with rational expressions and equations? These are just things to think about. And then we can think about, when you really get into that data, the distractor analysis, we can take a look at thinking about how we determine those strengths. So even in a particular problem, even if 30% of the students get the correct answer, 30% of the students have a strength. The other part of this part of the class may have some misconceptions or unfinished learning. So thinking about all those pieces as we design some interventions for students. So how do we build on strengths, but then mitigate those misconceptions, unfinished learning, and gaps? So this would help you thinking about the item numbers, specific item numbers, thinking about the distractors, and each distractor has a little bit different piece to it. It shows a little bit different understanding. And we'll talk a little bit about that as I'm going to show you some items, and we'll talk through that quickly so that it's basically a starting place for how we respond to instructional needs. So this was a question, and this is a 7th grade test. So we're really kind of zeroing in on fractions again in the 7th grade. And then this is really kind of a just a segue from last week to this week, taking a look at some of the same items, but now we're going to try and deal with them. So we take a look at this first problem in question 15. It says we're looking at these different items, and we see that 3% of the class did omit it. We can see that 34% of the class did get the correct answer. So for that 34%, it is definitely a strength. For C and A, it is not a strength. So if we take a look at C, for example, or for A, for example, that's not a number between the two. It's actually larger than 7/8. And if we take a look at C, which is a number, it's not between those two. So you really need to kind of think about, okay, so how do they engage in that? And the other piece to understand is that when you click on these distractors, you can see what students made those, have the strength, and those particular students who had the issues. So we'll take a look at a problem similar to this. Adding fractions is another issue. So again, for 41% of the class, of this particular class, it was a strength. Whereas for the other 59% of the class, because nobody omitted it, for the other 59% of the class, we have some misconceptions. So we can take a look at those. And what do we do about it? So if we take a look at this, we can see that for A, for example, and for C too. For A, typical issue where they add the numerators over the sum of the numerators over the sum of the denominators. And so that's clearly an issue that we need to address. In C, they realize that the 14 is the common denominator, which is a plus, and they have some strength there, but they still add the numerators as they see them over the 14. So clearly some issues around how we add fractions that we need to deal with. And this one was a 4 people equally sharing 3/4 of a whole pie. This isn't too, but 31% of the students did get it correct. So for that 31%, again, it's a strength. And then thinking about the equal sharing, well, the equal sharing of 4 people in a whole pizza would be 1/4. So they maybe misunderstood the problem. Division of fractions. For 53%, we have a strength, but then we have a variety of misunderstandings in getting the answers in the rest of these. And I'm not sure why in D they have the reciprocal of the correct answer. They may have flipped them both. I'm not really sure.
They cross-multiplied.
Cross-multiplied, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to think about how we enact strategies and design learning experiences to support the learning goals. So building on and enriching the strengths, thinking about those misconceptions or miscalculations, unfinished process and misconceptions. So thinking about all those pieces and keeping in mind what some of those misconceptions were in those problems. Some unfinished learning or gaps. We didn't have in the problems that I showed you, there weren't too many gaps, but now we need to kind of figure out those learning opportunities. And one of the things that we're dealing with too, that I must mention, is that you're not doing all of this at once. What you're doing is taking a look at items that are pertinent to your content that you're about to teach, and thinking about those prerequisite skills and how they build into your course, because we need to think about that as we're doing this piece. So you have the data, now what? Well, according to NCTM, we need to identify and address potential gaps and misconceptions. We definitely need to, when it matters most to students. So again, just in time. So thinking about specifically your course, thinking about the units that you're going to teach, thinking about the prerequisite skills, and then thinking about how we address those potential gaps and misconceptions in order to fill it in so that you can bridge to your course material, which is during instruction and before errors or faulty reason become consolidated and more difficult to remedy. If we think about the problems that we're talking about here with fractions, they may have had in 5th grade and 6th grade. 6th grade, it was supposed to be solid. In 5th grade, they may have had some pieces on fractions in 4th grade, but definitely in 5th grade, And so now we're in 7th grade. So they've had a couple of years where if we have those misconceptions and they're still continuing, we're going to have some issues around how do we mitigate those misconceptions. And this is a case in point. If the learner practices the skill incorrectly, but well, unlearning and relearning that skill is very difficult. So you're going to have to rewind, basically unlearn and then relearn the skill. And we know that that's a difficult process. And so the degree of success is dependent on the age of the learner and the period of practice and the learning and the learner's motivation to change. So this is really an important piece that we need to really worry about. We think about the students, well, they're in 7th grade, so they're still okay. You know, they can remedy these issues with fractions, but when we get to algebra and on and they're on, and the students are still having those same difficulties in adding fractions, multiplying fractions, ordering fractions. Same things are happening, but only on a higher level. And then you really have a lot to mitigate in order to jump into the course. So now is the best time to take care of it. So basically that unlearning and relearning, as you well know, is a challenge as you plan, and it takes time. So students are not going to automatically unlearn and relearn. They're going to have to unlearn and relearn and then practice over time. So little bits distributed over time, incorporating multiple representations. So thinking about different ways that they can take a look at particular problems, incorporating certainly discourse, productive discourse, that students need to be talking to each other about these methods and thinking about if there are multiple representations, how the multiple representations correlate to each other. And then of course, students must be part of the process. So if you get up there and say, well, this is how you do it, one more time, they've heard it probably a number of times, but unless they're part of the process, it's not going to help them. And then we need to, again, thinking about how do we link how do we link that particular content to this year's concepts? And so that link is that's key. And gaps, and so these gaps, of course, if you have a gap, which means that they really don't really have much understanding of it at all, it requires something else, a different creative approach. And this may be where we take a group of students who all have the same gap and work with them, if it's a small group of students versus most of the class. And this particular year, you may have some gaps for all students because they may have not had much instruction from March to September. We don't know. Or probably you know, but I don't. Okay, so if we think about distributed practice is the key. So once we learn something, so we're here, and so we have some new learning. Okay, and we practice, and we learn it for 10 minutes, and then one day later, we're almost to the point where we were to begin with, but we've retained a little bit. But if we think about it again and practice it, now we have a little bit more retention. And then we see it again, maybe in a month or two. Again, a little bit more retention. So we have to continue to practice over time. So that spiral review is really key. Maybe some spiral on tests as well. It's really key to making sure that they have that understanding. And so continuing to practice the correct methodologies and understandings is key to their retention. And so that's what we want. We want to retain it. I can remember there have been times when I thought I taught something, right? And 6 months later, it was like new learning. So they really needed to have a little bit more spiral learning along the way. And this is all from Sousa, from his book on how the brain learns mathematics. It's quite nice book. Okay, so again, do we reteach? So reteaching means that you take, let's say, a unit on fractions and you reteach it. You're addressing the same concepts of missed basic skills, do the same problems, but you practice it some more. You focus on procedures. So when you're dividing fractions, you flip and multiply. But then the students don't know why you flip and multiply, what it means when you flip and multiply, what you flip and multiply. So they need to understand the procedure. And the cognitive load is usually low. They're practicing. So, but this year, you certainly, and you don't really have the time any year, but it's particularly this year, you do not have time to reteach because you may have half the time with your students. We don't know, we have no idea knowing going forward how much of the school year will actually be in session. So we can't do this. We have to think of something else. We have to re-engage. And so we need to think about, in re-engaging, revisiting student thinking, addressing conceptual understanding, examine a task from a different perspective, critique approaches and making connections, engage the entire class in the mathematics. And usually the cognitive load is higher because you're discussing, you're critiquing, and it's from a different perspective. So this is certainly, we're going to think about re-engaging. And this comes from Inside Mathematics website. The other website that I always think about within re-engagement strategies is the Math Assessment Project. So considerations for re-engagement: think about the unit you're about to teach. Again, what are the prerequisites needed for students to be successful? Think about the topic and the items on the readiness test that address that topic. Consider the questions of the distractor analysis. What concepts were misunderstood? What was the common misconception? And what big ideas do you want to focus on? And then again, can't emphasize it enough, how will you bridge into the course content? So some of the re-engagement strategies that I could think of, and I'm sure you probably have more. Parallel problems. Which one doesn't belong? That's really kind of interesting. Compare and contrast. Number talks. Error analysis. Modules, that's probably something that you've not looked at. And we'll, hopefully we'll have time just to look at one or so. And then written response items, which is really a webinar that Terry and Kim are going to be doing later in October. So we talked about parallel problems, and I never had really some verbiage around parallel problems until I went to NCTM and took a look at it. And I knew how to write one, but I needed really to think about, so what is it really? So parallel problems, when you're thinking about creating a parallel problem, you start by identifying the big idea you want to focus on and think about what your students might need. And then if there are two or more tasks that focus on the same big idea at different development levels, but are quite similar. So you may want to use several different types of tasks. Again, you're going to do little over time. And then to design, tasks are designed to suit the needs of different students. But so that the whole range of students can participate in a discussion. And so this is really key when you have some students that are strong in a particular concept and others are not so. So parallel problems. So here we go. So this was a problem. If you recall the pizza problem, here is one that's very similar to it. You and 3 of your friends want a snack, and there is 3/4 of a candy bar in the cabinet. What do you notice and what do you wonder? So students may think, well, okay, so you're going to divide it, right? And there are you and 3 of your friends. So that means that there are 4 people. You're going to have to divide 3/4 of a candy bar by 4. They may think that, or you give them some time to think about it. And then we have some solutions. And so Sandy says that you get 1/4 of a bar each, where Doug says you get 3/16 of a bar each. Who's correct and why? Really very much parallel to that pizza problem, but just dealing with 2 of the distractors. One where they thought that they were dividing the whole thing by 4 people, and then and the correct response. So we're not really dealing with too many of the issues at one time. And then I threw in a little bit more and when I thought about this. Well, if you found 2 more candy bars on another shelf, so how much would each person get? And this would be kind of interesting to see how they attack this. So in adding fractions, so we have the sum of 2 fractions. Again, when we're dealing with this, the ideas here are fairly simple, and it really, we're getting at that understanding piece that you want. And so we have 3 possible solutions. Okay, so your friend is convinced that the correct answer is A, but you're equally convinced that the correct answer is B. Who's correct and why? Okay, so that really gets into just the 2 pieces, A and B, right? One is correct and one isn't. So thinking about why that is, and then there's an addendum to that, which is, so why is C incorrect? So once they've decided that B is the correct answer, then why is C not correct? So again, it's that error analysis in a parallel problem. It's a fairly rich discussion that students can have. Number talks. And I've used number talks in high school. You can use it from elementary school. It's usually considered, a lot of people consider it an elementary school level, but it's not. It definitely is not. You can use this through high school, and I used to use it a lot, especially when I was doing such things as rational expressions, where students needed to add fractions, multiply rational expressions, and etc. So if they don't understand that arithmetic piece, they certainly are going to have difficulty with the algebra. And it takes 5 to 15 minutes. They're very simple problems. They can be done without paper and pencil, and they might have one or more steps, but they're fairly easy. They can be done easily mentally. And then students talk. So basically you throw the problem up. It takes them maybe a minute or 2 to do the problem. You then put up their responses. And so you get the correct answer out of the way right away. And then you talk about how you got your answer. So that's really the crux of it. And then talking about maybe there are different approaches to it. So you may call on students who did it very simply at first, somebody who did it a little bit differently, and then compare and contrast between the 2 methods. And then you can use multiple strategies and methods, which is kind of nice. So for example, a number talk. Explain to your younger sister how to find the quotient, right, between 2 fractions. Very easy to do. They could do it in a lot of different ways. Here's another one. The heights of 3 plants are 1/2, 5/6, and 2/3. How would you arrange them by height? Some students might arrange them in increasing order, some might in decreasing order. And then there's some things to talk about. And what do you need to know in order to arrange them? So just some examples as I was thinking of how to do some things in a number talk. A written response item, and this is in the upcoming webinars, but the written response items are also rich. And you can take part of them. Actually, part of this could be a parallel problem. It could also be a number talk. You could just do one piece of it as a number talk. These are all these are all accessible. All you need to do is go to the website and say that you would like access to them. If you're a teacher in California, it's free. And so you just need to have your email address from your school.
3:30, Carol, 3:31.
Thank you. And then, so this is basically which two fractions are greater, very related to those problems that we talked about. This is which one doesn't belong. Okay, so I thought that this was kind of a cute showing. You could put anything up there. There are usually 4 objects, and you select one of them that doesn't belong. And this produces much in the way of discussion. Students will pick out probably the big blue dot first, the big blue one first, but it could be the number cube, it could be any one of them. So it is a rich discussion, and you want to start with something like this before you do something in terms of the mathematics. Or it could be something like this, where it could be where you're adding some fractions together, or you're dividing fractions together. And it takes some doing in order to create one of these, because you have to think about which one doesn't really belong, right? And it could be a lot of them for a lot of different reasons, right? So, so I think I'm running out of time. Okay, so let me just go on from that. We can go to learning modules. Okay, so learning modules, again, these are accessible on the on our website. Okay. Can you see this or no? I have to share it again. Okay.
We can see it, Carol.
Oh, you could see it?
Are you in the actual website? Or are you still on the screen?
No, I'm on the website.
No, we can't see that. You'll have to share that.
I've shared it. Okay. So.
I just put the link in the chat to the MDTP learning modules.
Perfect. Thank you. This one. Okay. Okay. So this is the learning modules, and in this particular case, we've dealt with rational expressions. So RATL would be the module we'd want to look at. And if we take a look at module 1, operations on fractions, which is what we were talking about, we have it discusses the addition and subtraction of fractions and multiplication and division, but mostly addition and subtraction. And then there are a series of lessons. So for example, in this try this, they show addition and subtraction of fractions with a number line, which is kind of nice. So it's a different way to take a look at it, etc. So that is accessible to you, and kind of a nice, it's nice to look at. So there may be a few things that you could give your students. I would suggest that it bumps up fairly rapidly. So module 1 would be perhaps the place where where middle school math could be accessed. Okay.
That's correct. The intent of these modules was
Right.
to bridge to a pre-calculus class. So they do go back, unpack the math back to where it's learned, and then bridge back up.
Right. Okay, so now I need to go back to PowerPoint. Okay. All right, so all of them have some sort of an explorer, and then they try and then watch, and then making connections in practice. So all of them have these components. and they were intended for college students, to bridge the gap between what they were, some of their misconceptions in high school, so that they could access that first level of college level math. And so it reaches back from middle school through high school. And then some references. Some of the resources that I continually look at. I typically go to those written response items because they're very rich. Notice and Wondering and Illuminate are really nice, but if you're not an NCTM member, you don't have access to it. Which one doesn't belong? Great ideas there. Visual Patterns is another place, great ideas. I mentioned this before, the Math Assessment Project, where they do a whole lot with re-engagement strategies, illustrative math, and UCubed also has a lot. And of course, Desmos. Okay, so this is the website. If you are in San Diego, Kim is the direct, well, she's the overall director, but she's the director of the regional office in San Diego, and I'm
No.
no, okay.
You are.
Okay, I am, okay. All right. So anyway, so yeah, so I'm the outreach facilitator, so contact me if you need some help in San Diego. And then there are other, of course, UC LA, and we have Terry with us today. And so she is the person you would contact as the outreach facilitator there. We're available to come out to sites to help with anything today. I mean, certainly in a webinar situation, you don't have time really to have you actually try some of these things on. So if this were a workshop, I would actually have you try on writing which one doesn't belong. And I would have you try on maybe writing some parallel problems. But in a situation where it's a webinar and I'm looking at a blank screen and getting no feedback whatsoever from you, it can't do that. So certainly we can all come out and help you if need be.
So because of that, Carol, we have a small group today with us. I enabled everybody's microphones if anybody wants to talk.
Okay, perfect.
To also, I mean, to ask questions, we can do question answers very informally this way. We have a smaller group.
Right.
Just to let everybody know, we do have an MDTP site at 4 CSUs and 4 UCs across the state. So each of them do either have a site director or an outreach facilitator. And Carol said, come out to your sites. Right now, we're not coming out to anywhere,
Well,
but we can, yeah, we can definitely offer workshops in a Zoom. I just finished teaching an 8-week summer school session at UC San Diego for incoming freshman students in math. And so remotely, we can do quite a bit of, we've learned a lot of strategies over the last few months that we can have the sessions be more interactive. So I did ask you, I did unmute you, allowed you if you want to go ahead and I think it's time for questions.
Yes, question and answer, yes.
You can type them in, or you can just open your mic up and chat with us. So I have a question, Carol. How does a person request coming out to talk to your district or your, where would they find that, the right person to contact if we wanted to come out to their, let's say they were in the Berkeley area or Oakland?
Okay, so on the website, the regional sites, where I had that before, I got to reshare it.
Our website, as Carol's getting there, has everything that you could possibly want.
And more, right?
Right.
This is where you can access the learning modules.
That's correct, where I sent it from.
And then assessments, this is where you, this talks about the written response items, and this is where you just sign up to get them.
Okay.
So if you had Berkeley, let's say, and you wanted to find out who at Berkeley, you just click on that and it shows you that Emilio is the staff person. There's a site coordinator as well, but Emilio would be the person that would come out to help you.
Or set up a workshop right now.
Or set things up, yes.
That's correct. And as a lot of the schools are going back and having person-to-person instruction, or student-teacher face-to-face instruction, I should say, we're not. Just so you know, UCs and CSUs are not coming back until at the very earliest next spring, probably. So we are not able to answer phones. We're not able to come out and talk to you to your one-on-one. We've been basically said to work remotely, but we're still working. So
yeah,
call us and we can on phones and email us. We'll definitely come out and work with your group. Or actually, we'll make a Zoom session.
Right. Yeah, I did one last week. I'm doing another one next week with a group of teachers. So, and we will design it any way that you want it. If you wanted to learn how to do some of these different types of, or how to use the data and then write problems, or create some curriculum around that, we can help you with that. And we can help you with analyzing your data. So customize it whatever way you want it.
Do we have any questions?
I just have a comment. I'm Julie McIntosh from Farmersville Junior High School, and I'm a new academic coach there. And when looking at your data analysis sheet, I can see that that's what the previous academic coach adapted for us to use across all of our subject matters when we're looking at our interim tests. So I was like, hey, I've seen that form before. In fact, I just looked at it today for everyone to use on our interim test for next week. So
Nice.
Anyway, so I appreciate
cool.
that. It was very useful.
Oh, good.
Because I used it for 2 or 3 years and I thought it was very useful. I thought I'm using the same form because it really got a lot done.
That's really great. I'm glad to hear it was useful, and it's adaptable. It's good to know that when you have a good formative assessment strategy, that it's adaptable to other content areas, and that's basically it should be, right? So that's fantastic.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?